The war had been going on for 3 years. Humanity had seen the Krell do terrible things before, but nothing could prepare them for what happened that morning. Commander Jake Morrison was standing in the control room of the Orbital Defense Station when every screen suddenly switched to the same broadcast. He watched in horror as the images appeared. The Krell had gathered 7 million human prisoners on the plains of a distant planet. What happened next was not a battle. It was murder on a scale that made Jake's hands shake. The aliens filmed everything. They wanted every human in the galaxy to watch. The Krell soldiers moved through the camps with their weapons, methodically killing everyone. Soldiers, doctors, engineers, diplomats. It did not matter. They killed them all while cameras recorded every moment. The Krell commander spoke directly into the camera. His words came through the translator in cold, mechanical English. This is what happens when you resist. Surrender now, or everyone we capture will die the same way. The broadcast lasted 4 hours. 4 hours of continuous killing while humanity watched helplessly from across the stars. On Earth, President Helen Carter sat in the Situation Room with her military advisors. The room was completely silent except for the sounds from the broadcast. Some of the people in the room were crying. Others had turned away from the screens, unable to watch anymore. Admiral Richard Hayes was the first person to speak when it finally ended. His voice was steady, but his hands were clenched into fists. We have to respond. Not with words. This cannot go unanswered. General Lisa Coleman nodded. 7 million people. They murdered 7 million of our people just to make a point. If we do nothing, we lose everything. President Carter stood up slowly. She looked around the room at all the faces filled with grief and rage. Get every fleet commander here. Every general. Every weapons scientist. We meet in 1 hour. She paused and her voice became very quiet. The Krell think they can scare us into giving up. They just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The message went out across all human colonies and military bases. Everyone knew something terrible had happened. The broadcasts were still playing on news channels everywhere. Families searched the faces in the footage, hoping not to see their loved ones, knowing that many would. Jake Morrison sat alone in his quarters after his shift ended. His younger brother had been captured 6 months ago during a raid on a supply convoy. Jake had been checking the prisoner lists every day, hoping for news. Now he knew. His brother was gone, dead on that planet with millions of others. He was not alone in his grief. Across human space, billions of people were learning that someone they loved had died in those camps. The Krell had not just killed 7 million soldiers. They had wounded all of humanity. In the streets of Earth's major cities, people gathered in silence. There were no protests, no riots, just quiet, terrible anger. Everyone understood that something fundamental had changed. The old rules were gone. The old limits did not matter anymore. The emergency session of the United Earth Council was called for the next morning. Representatives from every nation and colony traveled to Geneva. The building was surrounded by crowds of people holding pictures of the dead. They did not shout or demand action. They simply stood there bearing witness. When President Carter entered the council chamber, every person stood. She walked to the podium and looked out at the assembled representatives. Behind her, a screen showed the faces of the dead. Thousands and thousands of photographs, each one a life that had been stolen. Today we saw evil, Carter began. Pure, calculated evil. The Krell showed us who they really are. They are not warriors. They are butchers. She let those words hang in the air. They think this will break us. They think we will be too afraid to fight back. They are wrong. Admiral Hayes joined her at the podium. The Earth Defense Fleet is ready. We are not asking for permission to respond. We are asking for permission to end this threat completely. Dr. Karen Phillips, the head of weapons research, spoke next. We have been developing new weapons for 18 months. Weapons we hoped we would never have to use. That hope is gone now. We are ready to deploy everything we have. Some of the council members looked uncomfortable. They knew what Dr. Phillips was talking about. The rumors had been spreading for months about superweapons being built in secret labs. Weapons that could destroy entire planets. President Carter raised her hand for quiet. I know what you are thinking. You are worried that we will become like them, that we will lose our humanity in trying to stop them. But tell me this, if we do nothing, how many more millions will die? How many more broadcasts will we have to watch? She leaned forward. The Krell wanted to scare us. Instead, they have given us clarity. There can be no peace with an enemy like this. No negotiation. No surrender. They showed us their true nature. Now we will show them ours. The vote was called. Every single representative voted yes. For the first time in human history, every nation, every colony, every faction agreed on something. The Krell had unified humanity in a way nothing else ever could. After the vote, General Coleman approached the president privately. Are we really going to do this? Complete destruction? Helen Carter looked at her old friend. For a moment, her calm expression cracked. They killed 7 million of our people and broadcast it to the galaxy. They wanted us to be afraid. So yes, Lisa, we are going to do this. When we are done, the Krell will be nothing but a warning story that other species tell their children. The orders went out within hours. Every military base went to full alert. Every shipyard began working around the clock. Civilian ships were being converted into military vessels. Mining equipment was being turned into weapons. Even the oldest retired ships were being brought back into service. Jake Morrison received his new orders the next day. He was being transferred to a new ship, one of the Dreadnought-class vessels that had been rushed into production. The ship was called the Retribution. The name was fitting. As he packed his belongings, Jake looked at a picture of his brother. I will make sure they pay, he said quietly to the photograph. Every single one of them. Across human space, millions of other people were making the same promise. The Krell had wanted to send a message with their broadcast. They had succeeded. But the message humanity received was not fear. It was purpose. Cold, hard, unwavering purpose. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you pushed humanity too far. The Krell had broadcast their massacre thinking it would end the war. Instead, it had just guaranteed their own extinction. The military transformation happened faster than anyone thought possible. Within 1 week of the broadcast, every human shipyard was producing weapons at maximum capacity. Civilian factories stopped making consumer goods and started making ammunition. Scientists who had spent their careers on peaceful research were now building weapons of war. Captain Ben Taylor reported for duty on the Retribution 3 days after receiving his orders. The ship was massive, bigger than anything humanity had built before. It bristled with new weapon systems that had been theoretical just months ago. Now they were real, and they were ready to be used. His weapons officer, Lieutenant Amy Ward, gave him a tour of the armory. She pointed to rows of black missiles mounted along the walls. These are Hellfire missiles. Each one has a fusion warhead 50 times more powerful than anything we used before. They can break through planetary shields in one hit. Ben nodded slowly, trying to process the destructive power at his fingertips. What about the other systems? Amy pulled up a holographic display showing a different weapon. This is Nemesis. It is a biological weapon, but not like anything natural. It uses nanotechnology that targets specific DNA. We programmed it to recognize Krell genetics. Once it is released in an atmosphere, it spreads on its own. Every Krell in the area dies within hours. Ben felt sick to his stomach. That is genocide technology. Yes, sir, Amy replied quietly. That is exactly what it is. Command was very clear about that when they briefed us. We are not trying to win battles anymore. We are trying to eliminate the Krell completely. Similar conversations were happening across all of human space. Scientists on Europa worked day and night on new weapons. Military academies graduated new officers in record time. These new commanders were being trained for a different kind of war. A war with no rules, no limits, no mercy. Colonel Dan Miller was in charge of training the new Marine divisions. He stood before a battalion of recruits, most of them volunteers who had lost someone in the massacre. You all saw what happened, Dan told them. You know what we are fighting against. The Krell think they can win through brutality. They are wrong. What we are bringing is not just brutality. It is systematic destruction backed by technology they cannot match. He pulled up a star map showing Krell territory in red. In the old war, we targeted military bases and supply lines. Not anymore. Every Krell world is now a target. Every resource they have, we take or destroy. Every ship, every station, every presence they have in this galaxy will be erased. A young private named Kelly Rogers raised her hand. Sir, what about civilians? Dan's face became hard. The Krell did not care about civilians when they killed our people. Medical staff, engineers, diplomats. They murdered them all. We will not deliberately target civilians, but anyone supporting their war effort is a combatant, and we will show them the same mercy they showed us. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what they were being asked to do, and every single person had volunteered anyway. Deep beneath the surface of the moon, Dr. Karen Phillips worked on the final weapon. Project Nightfall was the most secret and most dangerous thing humanity had ever created. In the containment field in front of her was a small sphere of absolute darkness. It looked like a hole in reality itself. "Are we really going to use this?" asked Dr. Greg Patterson, her assistant. He stared at the sphere with barely concealed fear. Karen did not answer right away. She had been asking herself the same question every day. Nightfall was a weaponized black hole. Once deployed, it would consume everything in its path, growing stronger with each piece of matter it absorbed. There was no defense against it. Nothing could stop it once it started. "I am not sure," she finally said. "This weapon terrifies me, but you know what terrifies me more? That broadcast. 7 million people murdered while we watched. We have to make sure nothing like that ever happens again." Greg nodded slowly. "When do we deploy it?" "That is up to the president and the military. But it is ready." Karen looked at the dark sphere. "Heaven help us, it is ready." The fleets were assembling. Every available ship was being moved into position. Supplies were loaded, weapons were armed. Crews said goodbye to their families, knowing that many would not come back. But nobody hesitated. The Krell had given humanity a reason to fight that went beyond politics or territory. This was about survival, about justice, about making sure the galaxy understood that humanity would not be pushed around. President Carter gave one final speech before the fleets departed. She stood at the memorial wall in Arlington Cemetery, where the names of all 7 million victims had been engraved in stone. "We are about to do something terrible," she said to the cameras broadcasting across all human worlds. "We are going to bring destruction to the Krell on a scale they cannot imagine. Some will say we are becoming monsters. Maybe they are right. But I would rather be a living monster than a dead saint." She placed her hand on the memorial wall. "To those who died, I make this promise. You will be avenged. The civilization that murdered you will cease to exist, and the galaxy will know that humanity does not forgive. We do not forget, and we do not show mercy to those who show us none." Admiral Hayes watched the speech from the bridge of his flagship, the Vengeance. Around him, his crew made final preparations for departure. The fleet was ready. 300 ships, the largest military force humanity had ever assembled, and this was just the first wave. "All ships report ready, sir," his communications officer reported. Hayes nodded. He thought about the faces he had seen in the broadcast, thought about the 7 million people who had died while the galaxy watched, thought about what he was about to do. "All ships," he broadcast to the fleet. "This is Admiral Hayes. In 1 hour we jump to Krell space. Our mission is simple. Total destruction of enemy forces and infrastructure. No prisoners. No mercy. No surrender accepted. The Krell wanted to teach us a lesson about fear. We are about to teach them a lesson about consequences." The fleet acknowledged his orders. In exactly 1 hour they would jump to hyperspace and begin the counteroffensive. The Krell Empire had been preparing for a human surrender. What they were about to get instead was humanity's full wrath unleashed without restraint. The countdown began. Across the fleet, crews went to battle stations. Weapons were powered up. Shields were activated, and in the hearts of every human on those ships was the same cold determination. The Krell had started this war. Humanity was going to finish it. The Krell were not ready for what came next. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the Vengeance as the fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Krell home system. 300 human warships appeared all at once, their weapons already charging. The Krell defense stations tried to sound alerts, but they were already too late. "All ships weapons free," Hayes ordered. "Execute Operation Reckoning." Thousands of Hellfire missiles launched from the human fleet. They streaked across space like angry fireflies, moving faster than the Krell defense systems could track. The aliens tried to activate their shields, the same shields that had stopped human attacks for 3 years. The missiles hit them and punched straight through as if the shields were not even there. Explosions bloomed across the Krell orbital defenses. Space stations that had stood for centuries broke apart in seconds. Shipyards that were building the Krell war fleet were reduced to clouds of debris. The defense platforms that ringed the homeworld were destroyed before they could fire a single shot. On the surface of the Krell homeworld, Supreme Commander Zarketh watched his orbital defenses disappear from the tactical displays. He could not believe what he was seeing. The humans were supposed to be weak. Their technology was supposed to be inferior. This was not possible. He was the one who had ordered the broadcast of the human massacre. He had personally selected which prisoners would die first to make the greatest impact. He had been certain it would break human morale and force Earth to surrender. Now, as he watched human ships systematically destroy everything his empire had built, he realized he had made a terrible mistake. "Order all fleets to return to the homeworld immediately," he commanded his officers. "We must defend the core at all costs." But the human attack was not focused on just one location. At the same moment Hayes was attacking the homeworld, other human fleets were hitting 17 different Krell systems. Every major military base, every shipyard, every supply depot across the Empire came under simultaneous assault. The humans had planned this perfectly. Captain Ben Taylor commanded the retribution as it led an attack on the Krell colony of Draktar. This was the planet where many human prisoners had been held before they were moved to the execution site. Intelligence reports said the Krell commanders who organized the massacre had been stationed here. "Deploy Nemesis weapons," Ben ordered. His voice was steady, but inside he felt sick at what he was about to do. Lieutenant Amy hesitated for just a second, her finger hovering over the launch button. Then she pressed it. Canisters dropped through the atmosphere, spreading the nanoweapons across the colony's cities. The microscopic machines began their work immediately. On the planet below, Krell civilians and military personnel started dying. The nanoweapons were designed to be efficient. There was no pain, no suffering. One moment the Krell were alive, the next they were not. But efficiency did not make it less terrible. Within 3 hours, every Krell on the planet was dead. 40 million lives ended in one afternoon. Ben stared at the readout showing the death toll climbing. He had just killed more people than had died in the entire first year of the war. "Sir," Amy said quietly, "we are receiving surrender signals from the planet." "Ignore them," Ben replied, following his orders. "Scan for any remaining life signs. If there are any survivors, deploy another round." Amy's hands shook slightly as she worked the controls. "All scans show negative for Krell life signs. The colony is completely sterilized." Ben nodded. "Mark the planet as cleared and move to the next target." Across Krell space, the same scene repeated. Human forces attacked with overwhelming power and no hesitation. The Krell tried to surrender, tried to negotiate, tried to retreat. The humans ignored all of it. The orders from Earth were clear. This was not a war for territory anymore. It was a war of extinction. General Lisa Coleman led ground forces on the fortress world of Tharkoon. This was where the Krell military command had planned their operations, including the massacre of the human prisoners. Lisa did not bother with a ground assault. She simply ordered her ships to bombard the entire military complex from orbit. The bombardment lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the fortress that had stood for 1,000 years was a crater 5 miles deep. Lisa then landed with her Marines to sweep through what was left. "No survivors," she ordered as her troops moved through the ruins. Command confirmed that everyone stationed here was involved in planning the massacre. Every single one of them is responsible. The Marines, many of whom had lost friends or family in the camps, did not need to be told twice. By the end of the day, Tharkoon's military command structure had completely ceased to exist. Back on Earth, President Carter monitored the offensive from the Situation Room. Reports flooded in constantly. Every single engagement was a human victory. The Krell fleet was being destroyed piece by piece. Their colonies were falling silent. Their defenses were collapsing. "Madam President," one of her advisors said nervously, "we are receiving communications from neutral governments. The Galactic Council is calling our actions excessive. Some species are threatening to impose sanctions." Helen did not look up from the tactical display. Tell them that if they were concerned about excessive violence, they should have said something when 7 million humans were being slaughtered on live broadcast. "We are not interested in their opinions." The advisor hesitated. "Some of them are suggesting we are committing genocide." Now Helen did look up. Her eyes were cold. The Krell committed genocide when they murdered 7 million defenseless prisoners. What we are doing is justice. If the galaxy cannot tell the difference, that is their problem, not ours. In orbit around Krell colonies, human ships broadcast the same message over and over. The Krell Empire chose to murder 7 million human prisoners. Earth responded with a declaration of total destruction. Surrender will not be accepted. Evacuation will not be permitted. This is the consequence of your actions. Some Krell tried to flee in civilian ships. Human fighters intercepted them. The orders were absolute. Nothing leaves Krell space. No one escapes. Jake Morrison was piloting one of those fighters. He intercepted a Krell transport trying to reach neutral space. His targeting computer locked onto the ship. His finger hovered over the trigger. Inside that transport were families, children. He thought about his brother, thought about the broadcast, thought about 7 million people who had begged for mercy and received none. He pulled the trigger. The transport exploded. He moved on to the next target. By the end of the first week, the Krell Empire had lost more than half its territory. Their military was in complete disarray. Their government was in hiding. Casualty estimates put Krell deaths in the billions, and humanity was just getting started. Admiral Hayes received updated orders from Earth. Phase 2 of the operation was beginning. This phase had a simple objective: find every remaining Krell military installation and eliminate it. Then find every Krell colony world and neutralize it. The word neutralize had a very specific meaning in these orders. It meant deploy Nemesis weapons and sterilize the planet of all Krell life. Hayes read the orders and felt the weight of what he was being asked to do. Then he remembered the broadcast. Remembered watching helpless as 7 million people died. Remembered the Krell commander's smug face as he demanded human surrender. All ships, he broadcast to the fleet, continue the operation. No planet is to be left habitable. No installation is to be left standing. We end this now. The fleet acknowledged and moved deeper into Krell space, leaving only silence and death behind them. 3 months into the war, the Krell Empire was dying. Supreme Commander Zarketh sat in a bunker deep beneath the surface of a moon in the outer territories. This was the last remaining command post. Everything else had been destroyed. His fleet was reduced to scattered groups of ships hiding in deep space. His armies were gone. His colonies were silent. He stared at the reports coming in from across what used to be his empire. Every day brought news of another world going dark. Another fleet destroyed. Another billion Krell dead. The humans were not fighting a war. They were performing an extermination. How many do we have left? He asked his aide. The young Krell officer checked his data pad. His hands were shaking. Best estimates put our remaining population at 12 billion. We have lost 38 billion in the last 3 months. Zarketh closed his eyes. 38 billion. More than the entire human population. All dead because he had ordered that broadcast. Because he had thought humans were weak. Send a message, he said quietly, to Earth. Tell them we surrender unconditionally, no terms. Just make it stop. The message was sent on every frequency. It was broadcast across the galaxy. The Krell Empire, which had dominated this region of space for 10,000 years, was begging humanity for mercy. The message reached Admiral Hayes as his fleet prepared to assault the last major Krell shipyard. He read the surrender offer and showed it to his senior officers. What do we do, sir? His tactical officer asked. Hayes thought about it. The Krell were beaten. They had nothing left. Accepting the surrender would end the bloodshed. It was the civilized thing to do. Then he remembered 7 million faces. Remembered 4 hours of watching them die. Remembered that the Krell had offered no mercy, no chance to surrender, nothing but death. Forward this to Earth, he said. Let the President decide. Until we hear otherwise, we continue the operation. On Earth, President Carter was standing at the memorial wall when the surrender message arrived. She read it carefully. The Krell were begging. They were offering complete submission. They would disarm. They would pay reparations. They would do anything humanity demanded. She thought about accepting, thought about being merciful, thought about proving that humanity was better than the Krell. Then she looked at the wall covered in names. 7 million names. 7 million people who had surrendered and been murdered anyway. She typed her response. The Krell Empire broadcast the execution of 7 million human prisoners. They demanded we watch. They tried to break us. Humanity responded with a declaration of total destruction. We meant it. The surrender is noted but not accepted. The operation continues until all objectives are met. Admiral Hayes received the response and nodded. He had expected nothing else. All ships prepare to engage the shipyard. After that, we moved to Phase 3. Phase 3 was the final phase. It had one objective: make sure the Krell could never threaten anyone again. Ever. Captain Ben Taylor had been leading attacks for 3 months straight. His ship had destroyed 42 Krell installations. His weapons had killed billions. He no longer felt sick when he gave the orders. He no longer hesitated. He had become exactly what the war needed him to be. "Sir," Lieutenant Amy said, "next target is a civilian colony. Population is mostly families. No military presence." Ben checked the orders. The colony was on the list. Every Krell world was on the list. Deploy Nemesis weapons. Standard saturation pattern. Amy did not hesitate anymore either. She launched the weapons. Another 800 million Krell died that day. Another colony went silent. Colonel Dan Miller was on the surface of a Krell world called Trelna. His Marines were sweeping through the ruins of cities looking for survivors. Every Krell they found was eliminated on sight. There were no prisoners. No exceptions. One of his sergeants approached him. "Sir, we found a bunker. Looks like civilians took shelter there. Maybe 10,000 of them." Dan thought about it. These were civilians. Not soldiers. Just people trying to survive. "Seal the bunker. Pump in Nemesis. Make it quick." The sergeant saluted and walked away. Dan stood there for a moment, wondering what he had become. Then he pushed the thought away. This was war. This was justice. This was what the Krell had earned. On Earth, some people were starting to question the campaign. Protests began in major cities. Signs read, "We are better than this," and "Stop the genocide." News channels debated whether humanity had gone too far. President Carter addressed the nation again. "I hear the concerns. I understand the moral questions. But I will ask you all one thing. If we stop now, what message does that send? The Krell murdered 7 million of our people and suffered no real consequences. They get to surrender and rebuild? No, that is not justice. That is not safety. We finish this." The protests grew smaller after that. Most people still supported the war. They had lost someone. They had watched the broadcast. They wanted the Krell to pay. General Lisa Coleman stood on the bridge of her command ship, looking at the updated star map. Krell territory was shrinking every day. Soon there would be nothing left.
"How much longer?"
she asked her aide. "At current pace, all Krell colonies will be neutralized in 6 weeks. All military installations in 4 weeks. The homeworld is under siege now." "It should fall within days," Lisa nodded. 6 weeks. 6 weeks and the Krell Empire would be completely erased from the galaxy. She thought about whether that made her feel good or terrible. She decided it did not matter. It needed to be done. Admiral Hayes led the final assault on the Krell homeworld. The planet was defended by the last of their fleet, maybe 200 ships. The human fleet numbered over 400. It was not even close to a fair fight. The battle lasted 6 hours. The Krell fought desperately, knowing this was the end. Some rammed their ships into human vessels in suicide attacks. Others tried to break through and escape. None of them made it. When the orbital defenses were gone, Hayes prepared to give the final order. Prepare to deploy Nightfall. This was it. The ultimate weapon. The one that Dr. Karen Phillips had been terrified to create. A weaponized black hole that would consume the entire Krell homeworld and everything on it. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "are we really doing this?" Hayes looked at the planet below. 10 billion Krell lived on that world. 10 billion lives about to be erased from existence. "Yes," he said, "we are. Launch Nightfall." Deep in his bunker, Zarketh felt the ground begin to shake. His instruments were showing something impossible. A gravity anomaly was forming at the edge of the system. It was growing. Fast. He understood immediately what the humans had done. They had created a black hole. They were going to consume his entire world. In his final moments, as the bunker walls began to crack under the gravitational stress, he finally understood the truth. Humanity had not become monsters. They had always had this capacity. They had just never had a reason to use it before. He had given them that reason. The Krell homeworld was pulled apart slowly, taking 12 hours to be completely consumed. The humans watched to make sure it was complete. When it was done, there was nothing left but empty space where a planet had been. Admiral Hayes broadcast one final message to what remained of the Krell. The Krell homeworld has been destroyed. Your empire is ended. Any survivors will be hunted. There is no mercy. There is no surrender. This is what happens when you test humanity's limits. The message echoed across the galaxy. Other species heard it and understood. Humanity had changed. The peaceful explorers who had joined the galactic community 20 years ago were gone. In their place was something terrifying. 4 months after the broadcast, the Krell Empire ceased to exist. The final count was staggering. 50 billion Krell dead. Every colony neutralized. Every military installation destroyed. The homeworld consumed by a black hole. Ships carrying the last survivors were hunted down in deep space. Within 6 months, the Krell would be completely extinct. Admiral Hayes returned to Earth orbit with the fleet. The ships were battered, their hulls scarred by battle. But they had won. They had achieved what President Carter had ordered. Total annihilation. Jake Morrison walked through the memorial on Earth looking at the wall of names. He found his brother's name and placed his hand on it. "It is done," he said quietly. "They paid for what they did to you. All of them." Around him, thousands of other people were doing the same thing. Families visiting the names of loved ones who had died in the camps. Some were crying. Others looked satisfied. Most just looked tired. Captain Ben Taylor stood on the bridge of the Retribution as it docked at the orbital station. He had killed more people than he could count. Billions had died because of orders he had given. Lieutenant Amy approached him quietly. "Sir, we are getting reassigned. They are sending us to patrol the outer colonies." Ben nodded. "Good, I need a break from killing." Amy looked at him closely. "Are you okay, sir?" Ben thought about the question. Was he okay? He had done terrible things. He had wiped out entire planets. He had killed civilians, children, families. He had become a mass murderer in uniform. "No," he said honestly. "I am not okay." But it needed to be done. The Krell had to be stopped. Someone had to do it. On Earth, the debates continued. Historians were already writing about the war. Some called it justified. Others called it the greatest crime in human history. President Carter was compared to both great heroes and terrible villains. She gave one final speech at the memorial. The whole galaxy watched. "Today the Krell Empire is gone. We destroyed them completely. Some of you think we were right to do this. Others think we went too far. I understand both views." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "The Krell murdered 7 million of our people and broadcast it to make us afraid. We responded with total war. We killed 50 billion of them. We erased their entire civilization from existence. Was it justice? I do not know. Was it necessary? I believe it was." She turned to face the memorial wall. "But I want to be very clear about something. We did not do this lightly. We did not do this with joy. Every death weighs on us. Every world we destroyed haunts us. We became something terrible to stop something terrible. The question now is whether we can find our way back to who we were before." The speech resonated across human space. People began to discuss not just whether the war was right, but what it meant for humanity's future. They had proven they could destroy on a massive scale. Now they had to prove they could also rebuild. General Lisa Coleman was put in charge of the demilitarization program. The superweapons were decommissioned. The Nemesis technology was sealed away. The plans for the Nightfall weapon were destroyed. Humanity decided it never wanted to build such things again. "We kept these weapons secret during the war," Lisa explained to the press. "Now we are making sure they can never be used again. We showed the galaxy what we are capable of. That should be enough." Dr. Karen Phillips led the team that dismantled Project Nightfall. She watched as the containment fields were powered down and the weaponized singularity was safely dispersed. "I never want to see another one of these," she said. "The fact that we built it, that we used it, that will stay with me forever." Across the galaxy, other species watched humanity with new eyes. The peaceful species that had barely defended themselves for 3 years had transformed into something that could destroy entire civilizations. Diplomatic relations became more careful. Trade agreements were honored more strictly. Nobody wanted to be the next Krell. Some species proposed isolating humanity, keeping them contained in their own space. The motion failed. Others suggested making allies with Earth, reasoning that it was better to have humanity as a friend than an enemy. These efforts were more successful. Jake Morrison was discharged from the military 6 months after the war ended. He returned to his home colony and tried to build a normal life. It was hard. He had nightmares about the things he had seen and done, but he was alive. His brother was not. That was what mattered. Captain Ben Taylor retired from active service but stayed on as an instructor at the Naval Academy. He taught young officers about strategy and tactics. He also taught them about the cost of war, about what happens when civilizations push each other too far. The Krell thought they could break us, he told his students. They thought we were soft because we valued life. They learned that the opposite is true. We value life so much that when it is taken from us unjustly, we respond with everything we have. Remember that. Remember what we did, and make sure you never have to do it again. President Carter did not run for re-election. She stepped down after her term ended, accepting full responsibility for the decisions she had made. Some called her a hero. Others called her a war criminal. History would have to decide which was true. In her final address, she spoke to the memorial wall one last time. To the 7 million who died, you were not forgotten. You were avenged. The civilization that murdered you is gone. But the cost of that vengeance was high. We lost something in destroying the Krell. We lost our innocence. We can never go back to who we were before. She paused, placing her hand on the stone. But maybe that is not such a bad thing. We learned that we can be terrible when we need to be. We learned that we will protect our own at any cost. And we learned that mercy is only meaningful when it is given freely, not taken for granted. The memorial remained. The name stayed on the wall, and humanity moved forward, carrying the weight of what they had done. In the years that followed, humanity rebuilt. They focused on peaceful exploration again. They made new allies. They helped other species that were threatened by aggression. But everyone knew the truth. Humanity had changed. They were no longer naive newcomers to the galaxy. They were a proven force. Admiral Hayes, now retired, gave an interview 10 years after the war. The reporter asked him if he regretted the campaign. Every day, he said honestly. I regret that it was necessary. I regret the lives lost. I regret what we had to become. But do I regret stopping the Krell? No, they were going to keep killing us. Someone had to stop them. We did, the reporter pressed. But 50 billion dead? Entire planets sterilized? A homeworld destroyed? Was that not excessive? Hayes looked directly at the camera. The Krell murdered 7 million prisoners and broadcast it to terrorize us. They thought we would surrender. Instead, we showed them what happens when you push too far. Yes, 50 billion died. But you know what? That number would have been higher if the Krell had won. They would have kept killing until we were all dead or enslaved. So no, it was not excessive. It was survival. The interview became famous. It summarized how most humans felt about the war. Regret for what they had to do, but acceptance that it had been necessary. The galaxy remembered the Krell War as a turning point. It was the moment when humanity proved they were not to be trifled with. Other aggressive species became more cautious. Peaceful species felt safer knowing humanity would defend them if needed. And on Earth at the memorial, people continued to visit. They remembered the 7 million who died. They remembered the 50 billion Krell who died in response. They remembered what humanity had been forced to become. But most importantly, they remembered the lesson. That peace is precious, that life is valuable, and that when those things are violated, humanity will respond with everything they have, not because they want to, but because they have to. The Krell had wanted to send a message with their broadcast. They succeeded. But the message the galaxy received was not the one they intended. It was not about fear or submission. It was about consequences. You can hurt humanity. You can kill humans. But if you do, you better be prepared for what comes next. Because humanity does not forget. They do not forgive. And they will make sure that anyone who tests them learns the same lesson the Krell learned. That lesson was simple. Leave humanity alone or face total annihilation. The Krell chose wrong. They paid with their entire civilization. And the galaxy would never forget.